While we are at the topic of analysis and diagnosing campaigns, it's time for us to go back to something that we learned in the beginning, but maybe you forgot. And a lot of people do forget that when it comes to analysis. And so we're going to go back to our good old friend, the Facebook ad campaign scoring tool. Now, I showed you this in the beginning just so that you will be creating all of your campaigns with the consideration of all of these things in mind. Now, if you skip that video, definitely go back and see it. But it's important for you to understand that there are many factors that go into a successful Facebook campaign, a lot of which are actually outside the Facebook campaign. So as you can see here, we have 10-ish factors. I think they're 10. 10 factors that are major, but there could be some other lines that you could add over here and use the kind of the 3/4 rule, or like 75% rule. Either way, it's fine, to figure out whether or not your campaign will be successful, and kind of to understand where you should focus your attention for optimization. And again, we have your campaign setup where you need to look at, are you setting the right objectives, the right conversions, tracking setup, and is all that aligned to reality? Are you targeting the proper audiences? Are you delivering enough ads? Are you suffering from ad fatigue? Do you have a large enough audience? Do you reach enough people? Is your frequency too high? Is your CPM too high? Are your ads getting too expensive and all that? Then you should look at your conversion rates and bounce rates to see if your product or offer is good enough. Maybe your ads are great, but your product is not. And then maybe your product is great, but it's too expensive. And you should figure out abandoned carts, or maybe it has an expensive shipping and so on. Of course, all that time you should be collecting feedback actively to be able to figure out, like, people will tell you what the problem is, generally, if you ask them nicely. And then you should also consider, your ad creatives, looking at CTRs, relevance scores, and the other metrics that I showed you on how to analyze. And then again, your landing page, your entire customer journey, and your reputation and trust factors in general that could be affecting all of this. And now when you actually create your campaigns, if you already have campaigns that are running and spending money and so on, take a moment, take a look at all these factors, be very pessimistic, not even realistic, be pessimistic, because we are naturally overestimating how good the things that we create are, because if you made it, it must be good, right? That's not always the case, by the way, as we have seen many times, even after years of doing it and having tons of successful campaigns, we still do things that have errors that we didn't think about, and some of them are even quite dumb, honestly. So do that check and see, once you have created your Facebook ad, do the check, kind of ask yourself, score yourself on each of these parameters, and see what are you doing. And remember the rules, right? You need to score at least 75 for your campaign to be quite successful. And note that a very low score on one of these might disproportionately affect your results, right? So even if you have a 90, but one of these things here is 1, and it's very low, it could impact the others significantly, so they won't be as good. And remember that the small difference in this rating, like increasing it, improving it significantly by a small margin, can make the difference between a campaign that loses money and one that makes money. So it's about improving everything. Like sometimes it could be customer service or delivery times, or just simple things like that, or just the price. And then improving everything can kind of slowly lead you to a successful campaigns. Now, that is not a sure-proof model, however, and let's take a second to take a look at why. Like, if one of these things is just not good enough, people don't want it, don't understand it, don't get it, that means that you are scoring higher on something that is just not aligned with reality. For example, if you think your product is great, and it is, it truly is, but people just don't get it, don't want it, don't understand it, don't want to pay for it, even though your product is great, then that's not going to work, right? Because just people don't get it. So you need to figure out the reasons for that. And you can, of course, find the tool in the library, and you have links to it in the presentation as well. And use it, or kind of make your own. If you want to add your own factors, you can also just go here to File and make a copy, and make a copy of yourselves and add an additional factor or two that you want to consider in your specific business. But do remember that the way to diagnose campaigns is to try and find the problems and the weak spots. And so try to look at everything together and kind of what are the important factors that you need to have together, working together, that will ultimately make the sale. Finally, I want to mention something that we learned earlier in the Marketing Fundamentals course, and that's the idea behind friction, right? So we have the ABCs of marketing, if you would remember it like that, right? Where if at each point, like from the ad to the website, through the checkout process, and through the experience of the product, and maybe further buy-ins, the customer faces no friction, and the ad is clear, the landing page is clear, the product is simple and easy to use and wonderful and provides a lot of value, and then the upsells are easy and make sense, everything is going to be fine. But that's not really the case in reality. Or even if it is for some users, it's definitely not for everyone. I have not seen a company that has provided this perfect experience for 100% of its users. So there's always room to optimize by trying to see and figure out where the friction points are happening, where people are stopping and leaving the customer journey, not becoming advocates. Like if they don't love your brand, they are not brand advocates, and they are not trying to convince everyone in the world that your brand is the best in the world, then you're not there yet. And I would presume you're not there yet right now. So unless you're there, excuse me, but you need to think about these friction points. Where do people leave the customer journey, and what are the clutch moments where they stop and think about and they're not sure what they need to do? Like a good example of that is the consideration phase. Like, should I compare this with other products, or you just nailed it and I want it now? So think about the transition points between the different phases and the steps in the customer journey. Figure out what might prompt people to think more. Maybe you need to add some clarity there, where they wonder and they're not sure what to do. And if they don't find an answer, they're going to leave, and figure out also what are the points where they leave and try and figure out why. This will also kind of help you. And if you use the two approaches together, you will get great results, I promise you, because you will be scientifically looking at all the different parts of your campaign and your customer journey and the moments in between in the experience of the customer to really figure out what can you do to make the sale. And finally, before we conclude this video, I want to mention again the idea behind the conversational approach, if any of you skipped it in the marketing fundamental sessions. So the idea behind any marketing campaign, and the reason why pretty much all of our marketing campaigns are successful, is because we try to recreate very human conversations. And when we work with clients, we always sit down with the CEO or the founder of the company and try to extract that conversation through the customer development technique with them. And now that we know how the conversation should go, we just need to know who the customers are and conduct that conversation through ads, landing pages, websites, experiences, apps, and whatever that we want to, whatever experience we create for our digital business should mimic and reflect this conversation, right? It's just like creating a little chatbot. That's why chatbots actually work so effectively. It's because they recreate that conversation much more easily and directly. The chatbot exercise is a good example of how you should try and do that. Like, if you can make a successful chatbot by automating this conversation, that should kind of be what your ads and landing pages and product features represent on your digital experiences or your websites and ads and so on. So think about that conversational approach. Think about that conversation with the customer. What evidence do you need to present that your product is good? What do you need to convince them? What do you need to spark their interests? What do they need to say? How would they say these kind of things? How could you speak their language? And the easiest way to do that, again, is to just talk to customers, conduct these interviews, try to sell live, or even online, and manual live chat for a little bit, like I've been doing for a long time, and try to figure out these little intricacies of the conversation with your customers to be able to close the sales easily and quickly. If you do all these things, I'm sure your campaigns will become successful quite quickly. And that's pretty much everything I have on Diagnosing Campaigns. You need to know a lot to do it, but once you know it, it becomes pretty easy. So, yep, go ahead and analyze your campaigns now and see what happens. Maybe you'll make a lot more money. I do hope so.